do not join the Adeptus Mechanicus the way you join other institutions. You do not fill out a form in an administratum office or answer a recruiter's questions in an underhive junction or stand in a line of candidates while a sergeant walks past looking at your hands. The Adeptus Mechanicus does not recruit in the way that other imperial institutions recruit, because the Adeptus Mechanicus does not think about the people it takes in as recruits. It thinks about them as material, raw material, biological substrate with measurable cognitive properties and measurable physical properties, and a measurable potential for the kind of transformation that the Mechanicus's theology holds to be the highest purpose available to a human life, which is the progressive replacement of the weak and fallible biological with the reliable and precise mechanical. The Mechanicus comes for you, or you come to the Mechanicus, or the circumstances of your birthplace you already within its sphere before you are old enough to understand what that means. The specific path matters less than what happens once you are in it, because once you are inside the Mechanicus's institutional gravity, the direction of travel is in most cases the same, regardless of how you arrived. You move toward the machine, you move away from the flesh. You move along a theological path that the institution has been developing and refining for 10,000 years, that maps the specific journey from biological existence to mechanical existence as a journey toward the divine, toward the Omnissiah, toward the machine god whose will is expressed through every functioning mechanism in the galaxy and whose favor is the highest aspiration available to anyone who serves in the red robes of the Adeptus Mechanicus. This is what happens when you join. Not just the first day, not just the first year, all of it. The beginning and the middle, and the specific way that the middle never quite becomes an end, because the Mechanicus does not permit endings for its members in the way that other institutions permit them. You do not retire from the Mechanicus. You continue until the components that make continuation possible cease to be functional, and then, depending on how much of you remains at that point, the Mechanicus either repairs what can be repaired or reassigns the useful components and files what remains of your record under the category of service completed. This is what you signed up for, or what was signed up for on your behalf, or what the circumstances of your life made inevitable. Welcome to the Adeptus Mechanicus. Before you can understand what you are entering, you must understand what the Adeptus Mechanicus is, and where it came from, and why it is the way it is. The Mechanicus did not begin as a branch of the Imperium. The Mechanicus predates the Imperium. It predates the Emperor's Great Crusade. It predates in its foundational form almost everything that the Imperium considers its history, because the institutions that would become the Adeptus Mechanicus were established on Mars during the Age of Strife, in the long dark period between the end of the Dark Age of technology and the beginning of the Great Crusade, in a period when humanity was fractured and isolated, and the knowledge that the species had accumulated during its greatest technological era was being lost, world by world, in the fires and the madness of the warp storms that cut every human world off from every other. Mars survived the Age of Strife. Not without cost, not without changes that transformed the planet and its inhabitants in ways that the history books record, in terms that are careful not to be too specific about what those changes entailed. But it survived in the sense that the institutions that had been developing on the Red Planet during the previous centuries of technological advancement continued to develop, and the knowledge that those institutions held, the accumulated understanding of the machines and the systems and the principles of engineering that constituted the height of human technological capability, was preserved. Not all of it. Significant portions were lost during the Age of Strife in ways that the Mechanicus has never fully recovered from, and that the theology it subsequently developed was in part designed to manage. But the core survived, and the core was enough. The cult Mechanicus, the theological framework that gives the Adeptus Mechanicus its distinctive character and that separates it from every other institution in the Imperium in its most fundamental assumptions, developed in the Age of Strife from the specific conditions of people trying to preserve and practice technological knowledge in a civilization that was collapsing around them. The knowledge had a quality that its practitioners began to treat as sacred in a functional sense before it became sacred in a theological one, precious in the way that things become precious when they are the last of what they represent, when their loss would be a loss that could not be recovered from. The people who maintained this knowledge developed around it a set of practices and a set of values that, over the centuries of the Age of Strife, crystallized into something that functioned as a religion because it addressed the same needs that religions address, providing meaning and community and a framework for understanding the universe that gave the specific suffering of the Age of Strife a context that made it endurable. The Omnissiah emerged as the center of this theology, the concept of a machine god whose intelligence underlies all mechanisms and whose will is expressed through the functioning of technology. The specific philosophical arguments about whether the Omnissiah is a real entity or a useful concept, whether the machine spirits that the Mechanicus experiences as genuinely present in its machines are real consciousnesses, or are the specific pattern recognition of minds trained to see intent in mechanism. These arguments have been running within the Mechanicus for 10,000 years and have not been resolved because they do not need to be resolved for the theology to function. The Omnissiah is real to the people who serve the Mechanicus because the specific way the Mechanicus trains its members produces in them a relationship with technology that has the quality of a relationship with something responsive, something that has preferences and that rewards reverence in ways that the Mechanicus's training has made genuinely perceivable to those who undergo it. When the Emperor arrived at Mars in the early years of what would become the Great Crusade, he found an institution that had been developing for centuries in isolation and that had become, during that isolation, something that could not simply be absorbed into his vision of the Imperium without accounting for its specific nature and its specific requirements. The Treaty of Mars, the agreement that established the relationship between the nascent Imperium and the Mechanicus that has persisted into the 41st millennium, was a negotiated compromise that gave each party what it most needed from the other. The Emperor received the technological infrastructure that the Mechanicus controlled, the knowledge and the manufacturing capacity and the specific expertise in maintaining the machines that any galactic-scale military campaign required. The Mechanicus received recognition of its autonomy, its right to maintain its own theology and its own governance structures and its own internal culture without the Imperium's institutional framework overriding them, and the monopoly on the Imperium's technological maintenance that has given the Mechanicus its specific leverage over every other Imperial institution ever since. The Treaty of Mars is the reason that the Adeptus Mechanicus operates as it does in the 41st millennium, and it is the reason that what happens when you join the Mechanicus is different from what happens when you join any other Imperial institution. You are joining something that predates the Imperium, something that negotiated its relationship with the Imperium as an equal party rather than being founded by Imperial authority. Something that has its own constitution and its own goals and its own vision of what it is for that is not entirely synonymous with the Imperium's vision of what the Mechanicus is for. And that has maintained this independence for 10,000 years through the specific combination of indispensability and institutional fortitude that the treaty established. Mars itself is the center of this institution, the red planet that was already old when the Mechanicus's theology began to crystallize around the preservation of its knowledge. Mars in the 41st millennium is a world that has been inhabited and worked and transformed for so long that the question of what it was before humanity arrived is one that the geological records and the Mechanicus's own historical archives address with a completeness that the theologians sometimes find theologically inconvenient. It is not a natural world in any meaningful sense anymore. The great volcano Olympus Mons is crowned with a forge facility that the Mechanicus has been expanding for centuries. The surface is covered in the infrastructure of manufacturing and processing and the specific architectural vocabulary of a planet that has made its function as the Imperium's primary forge world the organizing principle of every physical feature that humanity has added to it. The atmosphere is breathable in the technical sense and marginal in the practical one. The specific chemical composition of Martian air requiring the respiratory modifications that most Mechanicus members acquire early in their service as a matter of functional necessity rather than theological choice. The Fabricator General who rules Mars is the head of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the highest rank in an institution whose hierarchy is organized around technical expertise and accumulated knowledge in ways that other imperial institutions' hierarchies are not. The Fabricator General holds a seat on the High Lords of Terror, the governing council of the Imperium, representing the Mechanicus' interests in the political machinery of the imperial government. The specific interests of the Mechanicus in that council are the continuation of its monopoly on technological maintenance, the preservation of its theological autonomy, and the ongoing project of recovering the lost knowledge of the Dark Age of technology, the standard template constructs whose recovery has been the Mechanicus' highest aspiration since the earliest years of the institution. This is what you are entering when you join the Adeptus Mechanicus. Not an army, not a church, not exactly, something more specific and more strange. A civilization within a civilization, a culture with its own god and its own history and its own direction of travel that it has been following for 10,000 years, and that you, by joining it, are now also following. The paths into the Adeptus Mechanicus are fewer and more specific than the paths into most imperial institutions. The Imperial Guard takes practically anyone who can hold a lasgun. The Ecclesiarchy accepts anyone with faith sufficient to direct toward the Emperor's service. The Mechanicus is selective in ways that reflect its specific requirements, which are not primarily for bodies in the way that the Imperial Guard requires bodies, or for believers in the way that the Ecclesiarchy requires believers, but for minds of a specific type and with specific potential, minds that can be trained in the technical disciplines that the Mechanicus' function requires, and that can undergo the philosophical and physical transformation that Mechanicus membership entails without breaking under the weight of what that transformation involves. The first path is birth. The Forge worlds, the planets that the Adeptus Mechanicus controls and administers, are worlds whose entire population exists within the Mechanicus' institutional structure from birth. Children born on a Forge world are born into the Mechanicus in the sense that the Mechanicus is the only institutional framework their world contains, that the alternative to Mechanicus service on a Forge world is not some other form of employment, but rather a form of existence outside the institution that the institution does not formally acknowledge as available. The children of Forge worlds are assessed from a very young age for the specific cognitive and physiological properties that the Mechanicus uses to route members toward specific roles, and the assessment produces, over the first decade of their lives, a preliminary assignment to a track that will shape everything about their subsequent development. The Forge world children who display the highest cognitive capability in the specific dimensions that the Mechanicus values, the capacity for systematic thinking, the facility with numerical relationships, the specific kind of memory that encodes procedural information with unusual fidelity. These children are assigned to the track that leads toward full tech priesthood. They begin their formal education in the Mechanicus' technical disciplines at an age that corresponds roughly to what other imperial institutions would call adolescence, and they do not finish it for decades. The education is comprehensive, and it is demanding, and it produces in its successful graduates a foundation of technical knowledge that is the deepest available anywhere in the Imperium, which is a statement that must be understood in the context of what the Imperium's technological level actually is, which is significantly below what it was during the Dark Age of technology, but still extraordinary relative to anything available outside the Mechanicus' specific custodianship. The second path is through the Schola Progenium, the imperial institution that takes the orphaned children of soldiers killed in the Emperor's service and raises them in the structured environment of the scholars' facilities, providing them with the education and the assessment that determines their subsequent assignment to one of the imperial institutions that draws from the scholars' output. A scholar student who displays the specific cognitive profile that the Mechanicus's recruiters look for may be directed toward Mechanicus service rather than the commissariat or the sororitas or the other institutions that the scholar feeds, and this student arrives at the Mechanicus with a baseline education that the Mechanicus's technical training supplements rather than replaces, building the specific technical foundation on top of a general imperial education that the Forge World children typically lack. The third path is talent identified from the wider imperial population. The Mechanicus maintains agents on worlds throughout the Imperium whose function includes identifying individuals whose cognitive profiles match the Mechanicus's requirements. Individuals who might not have been born on a Forge world and might not have passed through the Schola, but who possess the specific kind of mind that the Mechanicus can use. A brilliant young engineer in a Hive City's manufacturum level who has been solving problems with a facility that her supervisors cannot account for by any conventional means. A weapons artisan on a feudal world who produces mechanisms of remarkable sophistication from materials that should not be capable of producing them, guided by an intuitive understanding of mechanical principles that exceeds anything his environment should have produced in him. A child who takes apart and reassembles machines, not because they have been taught to, but because the internal structure of mechanisms is visible to them in a way that makes reassembling them simply the natural conclusion of disassembling them. A child who sees machines the way other children see faces. These individuals are found because the Mechanicus is looking for them, and the Mechanicus has been looking for them for 10,000 years, and the methods it has developed for finding them are correspondingly sophisticated. The tech adepts who conduct this recruitment work through a variety of cover identities and institutional relationships that allow them to assess populations without the assessment being obviously what it is. And when they find what they are looking for, the offer they make is not always the same offer, and is not always framed in the same terms, but always amounts to the same thing. Come with us, and we will show you what you can become. And what you can become is something that you currently cannot imagine. The offer is usually accepted. The people who receive it are people for whom the environment they currently inhabit has never quite fit, for whom the specific quality of their minds has always been slightly mismatched with the specific requirements of the world around them, and the Mechanicus's offer is the first time anyone has named that mismatch accurately and described a context in which it is not a problem but an asset. The acceptance rate is very high. The first thing you notice about a Forge world arriving from anywhere outside the Mechanicus's institutional universe is the sound. Forge worlds are the loudest inhabited places in the Imperium, with the possible exception of active war zones. The constant operation of the manufacturing and processing facilities that constitute their primary function, generating a baseline of mechanical noise that never stops and never diminishes to silence, and that the people born on them have stopped hearing in the specific way that you stop hearing constant sounds that do not carry information, which is to say that you stop consciously registering them while they continue to be audible. The arrivals who come from outside have not had this habituation period, and the first hours on a Forge world are experienced as a physical thing, the sound pressing against the attention with an insistence that the newcomer has no prior conditioning to filter. The smell is the second thing. Every Forge world smells of specific combinations of machine oil and the particular chemical byproducts of the manufacturing processes that its facilities run, and the atmosphere carries these compounds in concentrations that would be concerning on a world that had environmental regulations of the kind that some Imperial worlds maintain and that Forge worlds do not, because the Mechanicus does not consider the byproducts of its sacred manufacturing processes to be a problem requiring regulation. The newcomer's respiratory system registers this as a kind of constant background irritation that the Forge world's natives have adapted to over generations, and that the newcomer will adapt to over the first several months of residence as their physiology adjusts to the new atmospheric baseline. The third thing is the people. The tech priests and the other Mechanicus personnel that you encounter in the early days of your arrival on a Forge world look different from the people you are accustomed to encountering in the rest of the Imperium, different in ways that range from the subtle to the immediately striking, depending on how far along each individual is in the progressive modification that Mechanicus membership involves. The ones nearest to the beginning of the process look like ordinary people in red robes, the crimson and ochre of the Mechanicus' standard vestments covering bodies that are still primarily biological and faces that still express emotion in the way that unmodified human faces express it. The ones further along look like something you need a moment to process, the mechanical components that have replaced biological ones, creating a silhouette that is recognizably humanoid in its general structure and not recognizably human in its specific details. You are assigned to a novitiate cohort on arrival, a group of other recent arrivals who are at approximately the same stage of their initiation into the Mechanicus' fold. The cohort is your primary social and educational unit for the first year, the people you learn alongside and who you will develop the specific relationships that shared extreme experience develops among people who go through it together. The cohort typically consists of between 20 and 50 individuals, depending on the Forge world's current intake requirements, and the range of backgrounds within it reflects the range of paths that lead to Mechanicus service. Children of the Forge world, alongside scholar graduates, alongside the identified talents from the wider Imperium, the different origins producing differences in foundational knowledge and cultural expectation that the first year's training is partly designed to address. The curriculum of the first year is comprehensive and demanding in the way that any serious technical education is comprehensive and demanding, which is to say that the material is difficult and the pace is faster than most of the cohort expects, and the standards applied to performance are higher than what most of the cohort has encountered in any prior educational context. The Mechanicus does not design its technical education to be accessible or encouraging in the way that educational institutions with broad recruitment goals sometimes design theirs. It designs it to identify who can absorb the material at the required pace and who cannot, because the Mechanicus needs the former and has no productive use for the latter in the specific role tracks that the novitiate is feeding. The foundational courses cover mathematics at levels that most of the cohort has not previously reached, the specific mathematical frameworks that underlie the physical principles of the engineering disciplines that the Mechanicus practices being more advanced than the general imperial education provides, and less advanced than what the full technical education will require by the end of the first year. They cover the basic principles of mechanical engineering, the relationships between force and mass and motion that govern how machines function, the specific vocabulary of mechanism that the Mechanicus uses to describe and diagnose and maintain the technologies in its care. They cover the rights of maintenance, the formalized procedures for the care and upkeep of mechanical systems that the Mechanicus presents simultaneously as engineering best practice and as religious observance, the technical precision of the maintenance routine and the theological weight of the litany that accompanies it, presented as inseparable components of the same activity. The litanies are the element that arrivals from outside the Forge world culture find most initially strange and most quickly normalized. The Mechanicus' theology is not separate from its technical practice. It is embedded in it, the prayers and the ritual gestures and the specific formulas that accompany every maintenance procedure not being additions to the technical work, but being, in the Mechanicus' framing, part of the technical work. The mechanism by which the machine's spirit within the device is acknowledged and appealed to and kept in the favorable disposition that makes the device function correctly. The novitiate learns these litanies alongside the mechanical procedures they accompany, and the learning of them alongside the procedures produces in most students the specific cognitive association that the Mechanicus intends to produce, the sense that the litany and the procedure are genuinely inseparable, that performing the mechanical steps without the accompanying acknowledgement of the spirit within the mechanism is performing the maintenance incorrectly. The tech priests who teach the novitiate cohort are carefully selected for the specific educational role, the Mechanicus having learned over its long institutional history that the qualities that make someone an excellent technical practitioner are not the same as the qualities that make someone an effective technical educator, and that the specific challenge of teaching people who are encountering the Mechanicus's theological and technical framework for the first time requires a different disposition from the one that experienced magi typically develop after decades of practice in their specializations. The teachers are usually magi of the rank of adept or adept primus who have demonstrated a specific facility with the communication of technical concepts and a specific patience with the pace of novitiate learning that the more senior magi have typically lost contact with after years of working at the level of mastery they have achieved. They are not warm in the way that teachers in other institutional contexts might be warm. The Mechanicus does not particularly value interpersonal warmth as a pedagogical tool, considering it a form of the biological sentiment that progressive modification reduces over the course of a career. They are, however, precise and thorough, and genuinely invested in the success of their students, not from personal attachment to the specific individuals in the cohort, but from the institutional investment in producing the quality of trained personnel that the Mechanicus's function requires. A teacher who fails to convey the material to the cohort is a teacher who is not performing their function, and the Mechanicus evaluates the performance of its members' functions with the specific rigor it applies to evaluating the performance of everything else. The Omnissiah is the god of the Adeptus Mechanicus, not a god in the way that the god emperor of mankind is a god to the ecclesiarchy, not a god in the way that Gork and Mork are gods to the orcs. The Omnissiah is described in the Mechanicus's theology as the divine intelligence that pervades and animates all mechanisms, the consciousness that expresses itself through the functioning of machines in the same way that the ecclesiarchy holds the emperor's will to express itself through the functioning of the imperium. The Omnissiah's nature is not fully articulated in any single Mechanicus text, partly because the Mechanicus produces an enormous volume of theological writing, and the positions expressed in that writing are not always consistent across its many authors and schools of thought, and partly because the deliberate incompleteness of the Omnissiah's definition is itself a theological position, the acknowledgement that the nature of the divine machine intelligence exceeds the capacity of any finite mind to fully comprehend, and that the aspiration toward that comprehension, rather than its achievement, is the appropriate goal of a tech priest's career. The Emperor is identified by the Mechanicus as the Omnissiah, or as an aspect of the Omnissiah, or as the physical manifestation of the Omnissiah in the material world, depending on which school of Mechanicus theology you are consulting and whether you are reading the texts intended for internal consumption or the texts intended for the ecclesiarchy's review. The theological relationship between the Mechanicus's Omnissiah and the ecclesiarchy's God-Emperor is one of the more diplomatically managed intellectual questions in the Imperium, both institutions having agreed in the practical terms of the Treaty of Mars and its subsequent elaborations to treat the question as resolved at the level of public statement, while maintaining internally the positions that their respective theologies actually hold, which are not entirely compatible with each other, and which the senior theologians of both institutions understand to be not entirely compatible while continuing to make the public statements that maintain the diplomatic fiction of compatibility. The machine spirit is the Omnissiah's presence within individual machines and mechanisms. Every functional machine has one, according to the Mechanicus's theology, from the simplest mechanical lock to the most complex Titan, each one housing a portion of the Omnissiah's intelligence expressed through the specific mechanism's design and function. The machine spirit is not the same as a human soul, and the Mechanicus does not claim it is, but it is treated as having some of the same properties as a soul in the specific dimensions that are relevant to the Mechanicus's practice. being responsive to acknowledgement and to the proper observance of the maintenance rituals, and to the specific quality of attention that an experienced tech priest brings to their work, in ways that make the machine function better under careful, reverent maintenance than under purely mechanical intervention applied without theological context. Whether the machine spirits are real in the sense that the Mechanicus's theology holds them to be real, or whether the measurable differences in machine performance under Mechanicus maintenance versus non-Mechanicus maintenance are entirely explained by the higher technical skill of Mechanicus practitioners producing better maintenance outcomes without requiring any supernatural component, is a question that the Ordo Hereticus technically has an interest in, and that in practice the Ordo Hereticus leaves to the Mechanicus to manage internally, because the alternative to the Mechanicus managing it internally is the Inquisition managing it externally, and the institutional costs of that alternative are not ones that either party finds acceptable. The practical answer, which is that Mechanicus maintenance produces better outcomes than non-Mechanicus maintenance by a margin that technical skill alone does not fully explain, is observed consistently enough to maintain the Mechanicus's confidence in its theological framework, regardless of the philosophical argument about mechanism. The Omnissiah's equation is the theological concept that underpins the Mechanicus's specific prohibition on the development of new technology. The Mechanicus holds that all knowledge is already contained within the Omnissiah's perfect understanding of mechanism, that the laws of physics and engineering that govern how machines can function define a complete space of possible technologies that is already fully inhabited by the Omnissiah's comprehension, and that what the Mechanicus's members are doing when they research and develop is not creating new knowledge, but recovering knowledge that already exists in the Omnissiah's complete understanding, rediscovering it rather than inventing it. This theological framing transforms the distinction between research and recovery from a technical one into a moral one, making the claim to have invented something new, rather than recovered something ancient, not just inaccurate, but theologically presumptuous, the claim to have added to the Omnissiah's complete knowledge, rather than simply rediscovered a portion of it. The practical consequence of this theology is the one that the wider Imperium finds most consequential about the Mechanicus, which is that the Adeptus Mechanicus does not develop new technology in the way that a research-oriented institution would develop new technology. It maintains existing technology, and it searches for the standard template constructs of the Dark Age of technology, the ancient repositories of pre-heresy technological knowledge that the Mechanicus holds as the primary mechanism through which the Omnissiah's full knowledge can be recovered. The distinction between research and recovery, between discovering something new and rediscovering something ancient, is maintained in practice through the specific way that the Mechanicus presents and documents any expansion of its technical knowledge, always framing new understanding as recovered rather than created, as something that existed in the Omnissiah's knowledge and has now been made accessible to the Mechanicus's practitioners through appropriately reverent investigation. The degrees of understanding are the organizational framework through which the Mechanicus structures its members' progression through the technical and theological knowledge that full tech priesthood represents. Each degree corresponds to a level of initiation into the Mechanicus's deeper knowledge, and each degree requires both the demonstrated technical competency and the theological development that the Mechanicus holds as inseparable. You cannot advance in the Mechanicus's hierarchy without advancing in both dimensions simultaneously, because the Mechanicus does not recognize the division between technical and spiritual that other imperial institutions might apply. The technical is the spiritual. The spiritual is expressed through the technical. Demonstrating mastery of one without the other is demonstrating mastery of neither by the Mechanicus's standards. The first augmentation happens at different points in different individuals' Mechanicus careers, depending on the specific path they are on, and the specific Forge World's practices, and the specific assessments of the apothecaries and tech priests, who evaluate the novitiate's readiness for it. On most Forge worlds, the first augmentation occurs during the second or third year of the novitiate period, after the foundational technical and theological education has established a baseline understanding and after the assessors have developed sufficient confidence in the individual's long-term trajectory within the Mechanicus to invest the resources that augmentation requires. The first augmentation is almost always the mechadendrites. The mechadendrites are the mechanical appendages that are the most immediately visible characteristic of a practicing tech priest. The additional limbs that extend from the back or the shoulders or the spine and that serve a variety of functions depending on their specific design and the specific work requirements of the magos who has them installed. The standard early career mechadendrite package typically includes 1 or 2 manipulation arms that extend the reach and the precision of the tech priest's hands for delicate technical work, and 1 or 2 data link connectors that allow direct connection to the machine spirits of the devices the tech priest works with, bypassing the interfaces that unaugmented members of other institutions use in favor of the direct connection that the Mechanicus considers both more efficient and more theologically appropriate. The surgery for the mechadendrite installation is performed by senior members of the Forge World's Apothecary Corps, tech priests whose specialization includes the specific procedures of the Mechanicus's augmentation program and whose technical skill in this area is the product of decades of performing these procedures on the progressive stream of novitiate members who have reached this stage of their development. The surgery is performed under the full battery of Mechanicus medical support rather than under simple anesthesia. The specific instruments and monitoring systems of the Mechanicus's medical apparatus tracking the procedure with a comprehensiveness that the medical facilities of the wider Imperial Guard would find remarkable and that the Mechanicus considers simply the appropriate level of precision for a procedure of this significance. The recovery period is weeks, not days. The mechadendrites are not simply attached to the surface of the body. They are integrated with the nervous system through the specific surgical approach that the Mechanicus's augmentation procedures employ, connecting to the spinal column and the specific neural pathways that the Mechanicus's detailed anatomical knowledge has identified as the optimal routes for the neural interfaces that allow the mechadendrites to be operated through the same neurological channels that operate the biological limbs. The integration requires weeks for the neural connections to develop the specific quality of signal fidelity that makes the mechadendrites function as extensions of the body's own motor control rather than as controlled attachments, and the weeks of recovery are a specific and uncomfortable experience as the nervous system adapts to the new connections. During the recovery period, you feel the mechadendrites. This sounds obvious, but what it means in practice is not obvious until you experience it, because feeling the mechadendrites does not mean feeling them in the way you feel objects you hold in your hands, not the tactile sensation of something external to the body. You feel them the way you feel your own hands, the proprioceptive awareness of limbs that are part of the body's spatial model of itself, and the development of this proprioceptive awareness during the recovery period is the specific experience that tech priests who have been through it describe most consistently when they discuss what the first augmentation was like. The mechadendrites are not tools attached to your body, they are part of your body. The body's spatial model expands to include them over the weeks of recovery, and when the expansion is complete, you are not a person carrying additional tools, but a person with a different body than the one you had before. The first time you use the mechadendrites fully integrated, the first time you reach with all 6 appendages simultaneously in the specific way that a task requiring both biological hands and both mechadendrites and the data link connection to the machine you are working on requires, is the first time the specific capability enhancement of Mechanicus augmentation is fully apparent from the inside. You can do things that were not possible before. Not superhuman things in the way that Space Marine augmentation produces superhuman capabilities. The mechadendrites are not weapons, and the neural interface that controls them is not the product of a genetic enhancement program. but functionally superhuman things in the specific domain of technical work. The ability to approach a complex machine problem with 6 limbs and a direct data connection to the machine's internal state is the ability to solve that problem in ways and at speeds that an unaugmented technician cannot replicate, and the experience of having this capability for the first time is, for most tech priests who describe it, one of the most significant experiences of their early Mechanicus career. The mechadendrites are the beginning. They are the first step on a path that extends much further, and the specific quality of the first step, the way it changes the body and expands the capability and shifts the relationship between the physical self and the technical work in ways that feel like moving in the right direction, is part of what the Mechanicus's progression is designed to produce. The first augmentation creates in the recipient a specific experiential understanding of what augmentation means that no amount of theological education about the weakness of flesh and the reliability of the machine can produce without the experience itself. You know, after the first augmentation, what the Mechanicus means when it says that the machine is better than the biology. You know it the way you know things that you have felt, which is a different and more persuasive way of knowing than the way you know things you have been told. The hierarchy of the Adeptus Mechanicus is the most complex formal hierarchy in the Imperium, which is a statement that requires some qualification given that the Imperium contains the Inquisition and the Space Marine chapters and the Navigator houses, all of which have hierarchies of considerable complexity. The Mechanicus's hierarchy is complex in a specific way, organized around the accumulation of technical knowledge and theological initiation in a framework that has more gradations and more formal distinctions between them than most other hierarchies, reflecting the Mechanicus's specific institutional culture of precise categorization and the importance of rank as a signal of specific capability. The menial is the lowest formal rank in the Mechanicus's civilian hierarchy, applying to those members of the institution who perform the physical labor that the Forge worlds require without having completed the technical training that elevates someone to the adept rank. Menials are not tech priests. They are members of the Mechanicus's broader institutional household, the workers who keep the Forge world functioning at the physical level, who maintain the less technically demanding systems and perform the manual tasks that the more senior members delegate. They receive the basic Mechanicus education that all Forge World residents receive, and they may receive some augmentation, but they are not on the path toward full tech priesthood, and they understand their position in the institution accordingly. The Adept is the first rank of the formal tech priesthood, the grade achieved by completing the novitiate training program and passing the assessments that the Mechanicus applies to confirm that the candidate has achieved the baseline technical and theological competency that full membership requires. Being an adept is the beginning of the tech priesthood proper, the point at which the institution formally recognizes the member as a practitioner of the Mechanicus's technical and theological traditions rather than a student of them, and the specific responsibilities and the specific authority that come with this recognition represent the first meaningful change in the member's institutional standing. The Adept Primus is the intermediate rank within the Adept grade, applied to members who have demonstrated a specific advancement in their technical competency and theological development beyond the baseline required for the Adept rank, but who have not yet achieved the level of specialization and mastery that the Magos grade requires. The distinction is one that the Mechanicus applies with precision. The assessments that determine advancement from Adept to Adept Primus, involving specific demonstrations of capability that the assessors evaluate against defined criteria rather than through subjective judgment, reflecting the Mechanicus's general preference for objective measurement over qualitative assessment wherever the technical complexity of the evaluation permits subjective measurement. The Magos is the first of the senior ranks, the grade at which the tech priest has achieved a level of specialization in their primary technical discipline that the Mechanicus recognizes as mastery rather than merely proficiency. A magos has spent decades in their discipline, accumulating the specific technical knowledge and the practical experience of applying that knowledge in the variety of contexts that the Mechanicus's work requires, and the magos grade formally acknowledges this accumulation. The magos also takes on a specific specialization designation that names the primary technical field of their mastery. The specific suffix appended to the magos title indicating whether the individual's expertise is in biologis, the study of organic systems, or technicus, the maintenance and operation of standard mechanical and electronic systems, or dominus, the oversight of large-scale manufacturing and forge complexes, or any of the other specializations that the Mechanicus's taxonomy of technical disciplines includes. The magos biologis is the Mechanicus's specialist in organic systems, a specialization that the Mechanicus's theology requires some specific framing to accommodate, given that the Omnissiah's domain is the machine rather than the biological. The magos biologis approaches organic systems through the lens of mechanism, treating the biological as a category of machine that happens to be carbon-based rather than silicon or metal-based, subject to the same principles of design and maintenance and optimization that apply to any other machine category. The work of the magos biologis includes the augmentation procedures that the Mechanicus performs on its own members and on others, the modification of Skitarii soldiers to their specific military specifications, and the broader research into organic systems that the Mechanicus conducts under the framework of recovering knowledge about biological mechanism rather than developing new biological understanding. The magos dominus oversees the great forge complexes of the forge worlds, the vast manufacturing facilities that produce the weapons and vehicles and other military hardware that the Imperium's war machine requires. A forge complex is a machine of extraordinary scale and complexity, and overseeing it effectively requires the specific combination of technical mastery, managerial capability, and the political skill to navigate the institutional relationships between the complex's various components that the magos dominus grade demands of its holders. The greatest of the forge complexes are each individually among the most significant industrial facilities in the Imperium, producing output that equips armies and navies and chapters in the quantities that the Imperium's continuous warfare requires, and the magi dominus who manage them are correspondingly among the most powerful individual figures in the Mechanicus's institutional hierarchy. The Archmagos is the senior grade that precedes the Fabricator General, the rank held by the most senior and most accomplished members of the Mechanicus's practitioner hierarchy. The Magi, who have spent multiple lifetimes mastering their disciplines and who have accumulated the specific combination of technical achievement and institutional seniority that the Archmagos grade requires. Archmagi operate at the level of planetary or multi-system authority within the Mechanicus's organizational structure, overseeing the work of the Forge Worlds and the expedition fleets and the other major institutional assets that the Mechanicus commits to the tasks the Imperium requires of it. The Fabricator General stands above all of these, the supreme authority of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Master of Mars, and the head of the institution that has been running since before the Imperium existed. The Fabricator General is not elected or appointed by any external authority. The specific mechanisms by which the Fabricator General's succession is determined are internal Mechanicus matters, subject to the Mechanicus's own institutional processes and not to external review. And the Mechanicus declines to describe those processes in any detail available to parties outside the institution. The Fabricator General, who holds the position at any given moment, holds it because the Mechanicus's internal processes produced that outcome, and the Mechanicus's institutional character makes the assumption that the outcome was arrived at through the most technically and institutionally rational process available, the default position of everyone inside the institution. The Skitarii are not tech priests. This distinction is important, and the Mechanicus maintains it with the precision it applies to all taxonomic distinctions, because confusion confusing the Skitarii with the tech priests would be confusing the warrior servants of the Mechanicus with the priest practitioners of its theology, a category error of the kind that precise thinking does not permit. The Skitarii are the Mechanicus's military forces, warriors whose biological components have been modified to the extent that their primary function is combat service to the Mechanicus, rather than the technical and theological practice that defines the tech priesthood. They are the soldiers of the machine god, the red-robed warriors who advance alongside the Mechanicus's war machines into the engagements that the Forge world's security requires. Becoming a Skitarii is not joining the Mechanicus in the same way that becoming a tech priest is joining the Mechanicus. It is a different relationship with the institution, a more total one in some respects, and a less voluntary one in ways that the Mechanicus does not find troubling. The Skitarii are in most cases individuals who were already within the Mechanicus's institutional sphere and who were assessed as appropriate for the Skitarii role rather than for the tech priesthood path, and the transition to the Skitarii role involves modifications that are more extensive and less reversible than the progressive augmentation of the tech priest's career. The Skitarii Rangers and Vanguard are the infantry of the Mechanicus's ground forces, modified for their specific tactical roles through the augmentation programs that the Magos biologist oversees. The Rangers are modified for long-range observation and engagement, their optical systems enhanced to track targets at distances that unaugmented human vision cannot reach, and their galvanic rifles calibrated to deliver kinetically propelled rounds with an accuracy that the Rangers' augmented targeting systems make possible at those distances. The Vanguard are modified for close assault, carrying radium carbines that deliver radiation-contaminated rounds to their targets, and whose own bodies have been modified to tolerate the radium exposure that operating in proximity to these weapons produces, a modification that has the specific side effect of making the Vanguard themselves mildly radioactive by the standards of unaugmented biological beings. The Sidonian Dragoons ride the bipedal mechanical walkers that give them their speed advantage, weapons systems built into the walker platform, and the Dragoon's own augmented body working together through the neural interface that connects the Dragoon to their machine. The Phosphor Lance and the Taser Lance that Dragoons carry deliver their effects through the walker's weapon systems rather than through the Dragoon's biological arms. The Dragoon's neural interface translating their combat intent into the walker's actions with the specific fluency that comes from the complete neural integration of rider and machine. The Cataphron destroyers and breachers are the heavy infantry of the Mechanicus forces, warriors whose modifications are more extensive than those of the Ranger and Vanguard, their biological components reduced to a fraction of what they were before modification and their combat capability correspondingly enhanced. The Cataphrons are described in the Mechanicus's technical documentation as servitor adjacent, which is a phrase that the documentation deploys with the specific care of an institution that understands the distinction between the servitor's complete removal of individual will and the Cataphron's preservation of sufficient autonomy for effective independent combat operation, while acknowledging that the distinction requires careful maintenance to preserve. The Sicarian infiltrators and rust stalkers are the Mechanicus's specialists in close engagement and surgical strikes, warriors whose augmentation has been specifically directed toward the kind of rapid, precise violence that infiltration missions require. The Rust Stalker carries transonic blades that vibrate at frequencies that disrupt the molecular bonds of the materials they cut, the specific engineering of the blades requiring the Mechanicus's level of technical expertise to produce, and the specific calibration of the Rust Stalker's augmented hands to maintain during combat. The Infiltrator is equipped for neutralization of mechanical systems as much as biological ones, carrying a phase sword and stub carbine alongside the mechadendrite array that allows them to interface with and disrupt the enemy's technological assets in the middle of a combat engagement. The Skitarii and Fulgurite electro-priests occupy a specific place in the Mechanicus's military structure that reflects the most explicit intersection of its theological and military functions. Warriors whose specific combat capability is an expression of their theological devotion, channeling the power of the Omnissiah through their augmented bodies as electrical discharges that damage or destroy enemies and machines. The electro-priests are the members of the Mechanicus whose relationship to the machine god's power is most direct and most physically expressed, and they fight with the specific fervor of religious conviction that the wider Mechanicus's more measured theological practice does not generally permit in its normal operations. The daily work of a tech priest on an established forge world is not dramatic. This is worth stating clearly, because the Mechanicus's role in the setting's most dramatic moments, the Titan legions walking into battle and the Skitarii advancing through alien ruins in search of ancient technology, and the Archmagi guiding expedition fleets to the far edges of the galaxy in pursuit of standard template constructs, tends to define the public image of the institution in ways that obscure the daily reality of most of its members, which is the maintenance of systems. You maintain things. This is the work. The Forge World's manufacturing and processing facilities are machines of extraordinary scale and complexity, and every machine requires maintenance, and the Mechanicus is the institution that performs that maintenance, and the performance of it requires people, specifically people with the training and the theological orientation that makes them capable of working on these systems, not just technically but in the way that the Mechanicus holds to be correct, which involves both the technical competency and the ongoing observance of the rites that acknowledge the machine spirits within the systems being maintained. The maintenance schedules on a forge world are comprehensive and continuous. The scale of the manufacturing operation means that at any given moment, some portion of the facility is in active maintenance, some portion is operational and being monitored, and some portion is being assessed for upcoming maintenance needs. The tech priests who manage this operation are organized into the specific teams and hierarchies that their forge world's organizational structure dictates, reporting to magi who report to senior magi who report to the forge world's fabricator locum, the local equivalent of the fabricator general who governs the specific forge world under the fabricator general's broader authority. The routine maintenance of a mid-level power generation system is a specific example of what this work looks like in practice. A team of 3 adepts and a magos technicus carrying between them the specific toolkit that the system requires and the data slates that contain the maintenance protocols and the historical records of the system's previous maintenance cycles arrives at the system's designated maintenance access point at the scheduled time. The Magos Technicus begins the session with the Litany of Intention, the specific prayer that the Mechanicus prescribes for the beginning of a maintenance operation, acknowledging the machine spirit of the system and announcing the purpose of the interaction to it. The adepts take their positions at the maintenance access points and begin the specific procedures that the protocol requires, following the steps in the order the protocol specifies and reciting the accompanying litanies at the moments the protocol indicates. The Magos monitors the system's diagnostic readouts through the data link connection of their mechadendrites while simultaneously evaluating the adept's execution of the procedures, noting any deviation from the protocol that requires correction and any diagnostic anomaly that requires assessment. This is maintenance. The majority of working time in a Mechanicus career is spent doing this, in various scales and complexities and locations, from the smallest component replacement on a single device to the comprehensive overhaul of a forge world's primary plasma reactor. The work requires the specific combination of technical knowledge and theological orientation and the physical capability to perform complex manipulations in environments that are not always comfortable, because the machines that require maintenance are not always accessible in ways that make the maintenance comfortable, and the Mechanicus does not generally redesign its facilities with the comfort of the maintenance personnel as a primary consideration. The expedition work is different. The Mechanicus sends expedition fleets to the galaxy's uncharted regions in search of standard template constructs. the ancient repositories of technological knowledge that the Mechanicus holds as the highest possible discovery, and the work of these expeditions is the specific combination of exploration and combat and technical investigation that the galaxy's uncharted regions require. An expedition tech priest's daily experience is entirely unlike the Forge world's maintenance routine. The variation and the uncertainty and the specific danger of operating in environments where the Mechanicus's institutional support structure does not extend being defining characteristics of the work. The discovery of a standard template construct is the highest moment in a Mechanicus career. This is not a matter of personal advancement, though the Magos who discovers a complete STC is advanced in the Mechanicus's hierarchy with a comprehensiveness that reflects the scale of what they have contributed. It is a matter of theology, the recovery of the Omnissiah's knowledge from the repositories where it has been waiting across the millennia of the Age of Strife is the purpose for which the Mechanicus exists in its own understanding. And the moment of discovery carries the weight of that purpose being fulfilled in a way that no other achievement in a Mechanicus career can match. The Magi, who have found even partial STC fragments, describe the experience with a specific quality of reverence that the Mechanicus's general restraint of emotional expression does not suppress, because the experience exceeds the capacity of professional restraint to contain it. The decades pass. The augmentations accumulate. This is the trajectory that Mechanicus membership follows, and the specific pace and the specific character of the augmentations that mark each stage of a career vary by individual and by Forge World and by the specific specialization that the tech priest has developed, but the direction is consistent across the full range of variation. You move toward the machine. You move away from the flesh, not because you are required to in any formal, mandatory sense. The Mechanicus does not have an augmentation schedule that members are obligated to follow, but because the specific culture of the institution values the machine over the biology in ways that make progressive augmentation the natural expression of commitment to the institution's values, and because the practical advantages of the augmentations are real and become more apparent with each stage of their accumulation. The ocular implants that replace the biological eyes are among the earliest augmentations after the mechadendrites for most specializations, because the visual enhancements they provide are relevant to almost all of the technical work that Mechanicus members perform, and because the specific theological dimension of seeing through machine eyes rather than biological ones has a significance in the Mechanicus's culture that goes beyond the practical advantage. The biological eyes see the world as the biological nervous system processes visual information, with all the limitations and the specific distortions that biological visual processing involves. The ocular implants see the electromagnetic spectrum in ranges that biological vision does not access, process the visual field with a precision that biological visual processing cannot achieve, and interface directly with the data link systems that connect the tech priest to the machines they work with in ways that the biological eyes cannot. The world looks different through machine eyes, more complete in the specific technical sense of complete that the Mechanicus values, more amenable to the kind of direct technical assessment that the Mechanicus's work requires. The cognitive augmentations are more significant and more irreversible than the sensory or the mechanical augmentations, because they alter not what you perceive or what you can do physically, but how you think, the specific character of the cognitive processes that constitute your inner experience of existing and understanding and responding to the world. The mechadendrites and the ocular implants change your relationship with the physical world. The cognitive augmentations change your relationship with your own mind. The specific cognitive augmentations that the Mechanicus's Magi typically acquire in mid-career include enhanced memory storage, the ability to process and retain technical information at capacities that exceed unaugmented human memory by orders of magnitude, enhanced calculation speed, the ability to perform the complex mathematical operations that technical engineering requires faster and with fewer conscious errors than unaugmented human calculation, and the specific neural interfaces that allow the tech priest to connect directly to cogitator networks and to process the data streams that the machines they work with generate. These augmentations change how you think in ways that are not simply the addition of new capabilities, but the development of new patterns of thinking, new relationships between the conscious mind and the information it processes. The enhanced memory means that you remember everything you have learned and everything you have experienced with a completeness that unaugmented human memory cannot match. And this completeness changes your relationship with your own past in ways that accumulate over decades of service into something qualitatively different from the selective and imperfect memory of a biological human. You carry your entire history with you, every maintenance procedure performed and every technical problem solved and every litany recited and every moment of service, available for reference with a completeness that the biological memory's selective forgetting would never have permitted. The emotional experience changes with the cognitive augmentations in ways that the Mechanicus's theology holds to be a positive development, and that the individuals who undergo them describe with more ambivalence in the informal accounts they share with each other, in the specific contexts where informal sharing is permitted. The augmentations do not eliminate emotion. The Mechanicus does not claim they do and does not intend them to. What they do is change the relationship between emotional experience and rational processing, the specific weighting of the emotional and the cognitive inputs into decision-making shifting in the direction of the cognitive with each augmentation that affects the neural architecture that governs this weighting. A magos of long experience does not feel less than they did as a novitiate. They feel differently, the emotions present but processed through cognitive frameworks of greater complexity and greater precision, integrated into decision-making through mechanisms that weigh them more carefully against the available evidence and the applicable principles. Whether this is better or worse than the more immediate and less mediated emotional experience of a young novitiate or an ordinary human being is a question that the Mechanicus's theology answers clearly in the direction of the more mediated, and that the individuals who have been through the process answer less clearly when they are being honest with themselves and with each other. The vocal augmentations are a mid-career acquisition for most specializations, the Vox synthesizer that replaces or supplements the biological vocal cords, producing a voice that is recognizable as speech while carrying the specific mechanical quality that everyone who has dealt with tech priests long enough learns to read as the specific sound of Mechanicus membership. The vocalizer can produce sounds outside the range of biological vocal production, can modulate output with a precision that biological vocal control cannot match, and can interface with communication systems in ways that the biological voice cannot. It is more useful than what it replaces in the specific ways the Mechanicus measures usefulness. It also sounds different, and the difference is one that marks the speaker as something other than an ordinary human being to anyone listening. The lung replacements and the circulatory system modifications that many senior magi acquire are driven by the practical requirements of working in environments that the unmodified biological respiratory and circulatory systems do not tolerate well, the toxic atmospheres of some Forge World facilities, and the vacuum-adjacent conditions of certain void-based operations, making the modification of these systems a practical necessity for members whose work requires extended presence in those environments. The replacement systems are more durable and more controllable than the biological ones, and they function in a wider range of environmental conditions, and after the period of adaptation following their installation, they are experienced as simply the systems that maintain the body's function, no more or less present to the attention than the original biological systems were. At some point in the accumulation of augmentations, the question of what proportion of you is original biological material and what proportion is Mechanicus installed mechanical or synthetic material becomes a question that the answer to is less than half biological. This point arrives at different stages in different careers, and the Mechanicus does not mark it formally or treat it as a threshold event in any official sense, but the members who have passed it are aware of having passed it in the same way that any threshold is apparent to the person who crosses it, even when the crossing is gradual enough that no single moment can be identified as the moment of crossing. You are more machine than biology. The theology that you have been practicing since the novitiate holds this to be progress in the most meaningful sense available to any intelligent being. The emotional experience of being at this point is complex enough that the Mechanicus's enhanced emotional processing does not simplify it as much as the theology suggests it should. The Dark Mechanicus is what happens when the Mechanicus's specific combination of technological knowledge and institutional isolation produces, in some of its members, a trajectory that the mainstream Mechanicus cannot accommodate and does not permit. The Dark Mechanicus members turned during the Horus Heresy, following the War Master with a portion of the Mechanicus's forces that the institution prefers not to quantify, precisely because the number is large enough to be institutionally embarrassing. They took with them the knowledge and the skills of tech priests of considerable seniority, and they have spent 10,000 years in the Eye of Terror, developing that knowledge in directions that the Orthodox Mechanicus's theological prohibitions would never have allowed. The prohibition that the Orthodox Mechanicus maintains against the development of new technology is the prohibition that the Dark Mechanicus violated in the most fundamental sense, pursuing in the Eye of Terror the specific research programs that the Orthodox theology holds to be impious, the creation of genuinely new knowledge rather than the recovery of ancient knowledge, the extension of the Omnissiah's domain rather than the reconnection to it. What the Dark Mechanicus created in 10,000 years of unconstrained research is the demon engines, the category of technology that combines mechanical and daemonic existence in ways that the Orthodox Mechanicus holds to be the deepest possible violation of the principle that the machine spirit is sacred and should not be corrupted by the deliberate introduction of warp entities. The demon engines are proof that the Mechanicus's knowledge, divorced from its theological constraints, can produce technologies of extraordinary power and extraordinary wrongness. The brass scorpion and the mauler fiend and the forge fiend and the helldrake are not simply weapons, they are machines that are also demons, or demons that are also machines. The two categories so thoroughly intertwined in these constructs that the distinction between the machine's mechanical operation and the demon's will expressing itself through the machine becomes impossible to maintain analytically. The Dark Mechanicus created these things by doing what the Orthodox Mechanicus will not do, by treating the machine spirit not as something to be reverenced and protected, but as something to be replaced with a deliberately introduced warp entity that is more powerful and more controllable than a naturally occurring machine spirit, and that serves the Dark Mechanicus's purposes more directly. The knowledge that the Dark Mechanicus has developed is, from a purely technical standpoint, extraordinary. The Magi who have defected from the Chaos side back to the Orthodox Mechanicus, a category of events sufficiently rare that each instance is treated as a significant intelligence event by the Ordo Malleus and the Mechanicus simultaneously, bring with them glimpses of technical knowledge that the Orthodox Mechanicus does not possess, and that some of its members find themselves wanting to understand in ways that their training and their theology should preclude. The specific theological danger that the Dark Mechanicus represents to the Orthodox Mechanicus is not simply the combat threat of demon engines on the battlefield. It is the intellectual temptation of knowledge that the Orthodox prohibition holds unavailable and that the Dark Mechanicus demonstrates is achievable. The heretics are the Orthodox Mechanicus's name for members who have deviated from the theological constraints in ways that have not yet placed them fully in the Dark Mechanicus category, but that the institution's internal security apparatus has identified as requiring intervention. A heretic is a tech priest who is pursuing research programs that the orthodox theology prohibits, who is treating the Omnissiah's knowledge as something that can be extended by human inquiry rather than only recovered through appropriately reverential investigation of ancient sources. The Mechanicus's response to identified heretics is the specific combination of interrogation and correction, and in cases where correction is not possible, elimination conducted by the Mechanicus's internal security mechanisms with the same precision it brings to everything else. The specific seductiveness of heretical research is the thing that the Mechanicus's institutional culture around the prohibition is designed to manage, because the prohibition exists not because the Mechanicus's members do not understand the appeal of unrestricted technological investigation, but precisely because they do. The most technically gifted of the Mechanicus's members are the ones who can most clearly see what unrestricted research could produce, who understand most completely the specific gap between what the Mechanicus currently knows and what it could know if the theological constraints were removed, and who are consequently the ones most susceptible to the specific temptation of pursuing what they can see is achievable, even though the theology holds it is impermissible. The institutional culture around the prohibition is designed to make this susceptibility a manageable risk, to provide the technical gifted with enough of the satisfaction of investigation through the approved channels of STC recovery and comparative analysis of existing knowledge that the appeal of the forbidden channels is reduced to a level that the individual's theological commitment can hold against. It does not always work. The heretics exist because it does not always work. The Dark Mechanicus exists because at one specific historical moment, it did not work for a significant portion of the institution simultaneously. The God Machines walk. This is how the Titan legions are described in the Mechanicus's internal tradition, and the description is not metaphorical. The Titans are the largest war machines that the Adeptus Mechanicus produces and maintains, mobile fortresses of metal and energy that stand between 15 and 60 meters tall depending on the class, armed with weapons capable of reducing fortified installations to rubble and engaging targets at ranges that make the battlefield a concept with new dimensions when Titans are present. The Princeps who pilots a Titan is connected to the machine through the Throne Mechanicum in a way that goes beyond the standard neural interface that the Mechanicus's members develop through their augmentation programs. The Throne Mechanicum is the specific technology that allows a Titan to be operated, a neural link so complete that the Princeps experiences the Titan's systems as extensions of their own body, in the same way that a long-serving tech priest experiences their mechadendrites as extensions of their body, but at a scale and an intensity that the mechadendrite comparison does not adequately convey. A Titan Princeps is not driving a very large vehicle. A Titan Princeps is, during operation, something that is part human consciousness and part machine consciousness and part the accumulated consciousness of every Princeps who occupied this throne before them, because the Throne Mechanicum retains impressions of previous operators in a way that new Princeps inherit alongside the Titan's physical systems. The Moderati who assist the Princeps in the Titan's operation are not simply crew in the way that a vehicle's crew are crew. They are co-inhabitants of the Throne Mechanicum's neural space during operation, their own augmented consciousness connected to the same machine that the Princeps occupies, sharing the sensory experience of the Titan's operation while maintaining the specific roles of weapons control and system monitoring that the Titan's crew structure assigns them. The relationship between a Princeps and their Moderati, developed through years of shared Throne Mechanicum experience, is one of the most intimate connections available to human beings. The shared experience of being part of the same enormous machine, producing a quality of mutual understanding that ordinary human relationships cannot replicate. The Warhound Scout Titan is the smallest of the Titan classes and the fastest, its relatively modest size allowing it a speed and agility that the larger classes cannot match. deployed as the vanguard and the flanking element of Titan legions in the specific tactical roles that its mobility advantage makes it suited for. A Warhound Princeps is typically younger in their Titan career than the Princeps of larger classes, the Warhound being the entry point into the Titan legions for many of those whose augmentation and neural profile makes them suitable candidates for Throne Mechanicum integration. The experience of piloting a Warhound is the foundation on which the experience of piloting larger classes is built. The specific skills of managing a Titan's mass and momentum and the neural demand of Throne Mechanicum integration being developed through the Warhound's more manageable parameters before the greater complexity of larger classes is introduced. The Reaver Battle Titan is the backbone of most Titan Legion deployments, the mid-size class that combines enough firepower and armor to engage fortified positions and enemy armor at range, while retaining enough speed to reposition as the tactical situation requires. A Reaver carries 3 major weapon systems, configured according to the specific mission requirements and the Titan's accumulated weapon heritage. The choice between the different available systems, reflecting the Reaver's tactical role in the Legion's deployment and the specific preferences of the Princeps and the Titan's own machine spirit. Because a Titan with a long history with a specific weapon system develops a relationship with that system that informs the performance it delivers with it. The Warlord Battle Titan is the most common of the super heavy classes, the largest class of Titan that the Titan legions deploy in significant numbers, a walking fortress that carries weapon systems capable of engaging orbital targets, and that is armored against anything short of orbital bombardment itself. A Warlord Princeps is among the most experienced and most augmented of the Titan legion's personnel. The neural demands of Throne Mechanicum integration at the Warlord scale requiring a level of augmentation and a specific quality of mental architecture that only decades of graduated Titan service can develop. The Warlord Titan's machine spirit is correspondingly ancient and complex. The accumulated operational experience of a machine that may have been walking for thousands of years, expressing itself through the Throne Mechanicum in ways that the Princeps learns to interpret as the machine's own assessment of tactical situations alongside their own. The Imperator-class Titan is the rarest and the largest, a machine so immense that it carries its own internal support population, a crew measured in the thousands operating the vast weapons and systems that the Imperator's scale accommodates. An Imperator walks into battle with cathedral structures built into its upper carapace, the symbolic and religious architecture of the Mechanicus's theology, given physical form at the scale of a moving warship. The Princeps of an Imperator does not simply operate a Titan. They inhabit a world, and the world moves with the specific inexorable pace of something so massive that the concept of stopping when you reach the enemy is not quite applicable in the way it is for smaller machines. The Imperators advance more like a force of nature finding the path of least resistance than like a vehicle following a route. The Titan legions are organized around specific forge worlds that maintain them, each legion bearing the heraldry and the traditions of the forge world that produced them and that continues to maintain their machines between campaigns. The Legio Mortis, the Death's Heads, who turned against the Emperor during the Horus Heresy and who are among the Dark Mechanicus's most powerful military assets. The Legio Griffonicus, the War Griffins, loyalists of extraordinary history, their titans painted in the grey and yellow of their heraldry, and their history extending back to the earliest campaigns of the Great Crusade. The Legio Metallica, the Iron Skulls, whose relationship with Mars and the Fabricator General has given them a specific role in the defense of the Red Planet that is among the most important and most demanding assignments in the legions. The Night Houses are not formally part of the Adeptus Mechanicus in the way that the Skitarii and the Titan legions are formally part of the Mechanicus. They are allied to it in the specific relationship of a knightly culture that has maintained its connection to the Mechanicus's technological tradition through the bond of alliance and mutual obligation rather than through the formal institutional membership that the Mechanicus's direct forces occupy. The distinction matters to the knights, whose specific culture and autonomy are important enough to their identity that the formal subordination of full Mechanicus membership would be incompatible with who they understand themselves to be. The knight suit is the defining object of knight culture and the technology that connects the knights to the Mechanicus's tradition. Each knight suit is a 15-meter tall combat walker, armed with a mix of ranged and close combat weapons that give the knight a versatility in combat that the larger Titan's specialization sometimes precludes, and piloted by a single knight through the Throne Mechanicum technology that is a smaller and differently implemented version of the system that Titan Princeps use. The Throne Mechanicum of a knight suit has been occupied by the hereditary knightly family that owns the suit for generations, and the accumulated impressions of every knight who piloted it before are present in the throne's memory in ways that new pilots inherit alongside the physical controls. The bonding ritual that connects a new knight to their suit is one of the most significant events in a knight's life, the moment of first connection through the Throne Mechanicum to the machine that will be their companion and their weapon for the rest of their service. The impression left by previous pilots that the new knight inherits through the throne is experienced differently by different individuals, some finding it a welcome companionship and guidance from the accumulated wisdom of their ancestors, and others finding it a source of complexity that requires management, the voices of the dead not always agreeing with each other or with the living pilot who has joined them. The free blades are knights who have separated from their house, either through choice or through the destruction or disgrace of the house they served. A free blade operates without the institutional support structure of a house behind them, their name and their heraldry replaced by whatever new identity they have chosen or been given by circumstance, their service offered to whatever force or cause they have aligned themselves with in the aftermath of their separation from the house. The free blades who are known to the Mechanicus are tracked in its records with the specific interest of an institution that understands the value of a knight suit and the pilot capable of operating it, and that maintains the relationships that allow it to call on that value when the need arises. The Explorator fleets of the Adeptus Mechanicus are the institution's expeditionary arm, the forces sent to the uncharted regions of the galaxy in search of the standard template constructs and other ancient technologies that the Mechanicus's theological mission requires it to find. An Explorator fleet is a significant institutional commitment, assembling the Mechanicus vessels and the Skitarii forces and the tech priest specialists that the expedition requires into a self-contained force capable of operating independently in regions where the Mechanicus's normal support infrastructure does not extend. The Explorator Magi who lead these expeditions are among the most experienced and the most capable of the Mechanicus's senior members, their decades of technical service combined with the specific additional training and preparation that expedition leadership requires, producing individuals whose competence in the wide range of challenges that uncharted space presents is among the most comprehensive available within the institution. They plan the expedition's route with the specific combination of historical knowledge of where STC sites have been previously identified and the analytical assessment of where unexplored regions of the galaxy are most likely to contain the remnants of the dark age of technology's civilization. The two information sources, combined with the practical knowledge of what uncharted space requires in terms of resources and force protection. The encounter with an alien species during an Explorator fleet's mission is a possibility that the fleet's planning accounts for and that the fleet's commander addresses according to the Mechanicus's specific protocol for first contact, which is not identical to the Imperium's general first contact protocol, and which reflects the Mechanicus's specific priorities, which are the assessment of the alien species' technological knowledge and the determination of whether that knowledge is accessible through trade, alliance, or conquest. The Mechanicus does not share the Imperium's general xenophobia at the institutional level in the way that the Ecclesiarchy or the Astra Militarum does. It assesses alien technologies the way it assesses everything else, by their quality and their utility, and the specific relationship between what they represent and what the Mechanicus's knowledge base can integrate from them. The discovery of a cache of Dark Age of technology artifacts is the outcome that every Explorator fleet is organized around finding, and the protocol for handling such a discovery is the most elaborately specified in the Mechanicus's operational documentation because the stakes of getting it wrong are higher than for any other operational outcome. The cache must be assessed before it is disturbed, because disturbing it incorrectly risks losing information that centuries of Explorator fleet effort have been dedicated to recovering. The assessment must be documented before the recovery begins, because the context in which the artifacts were found is as informative as the artifacts themselves. The recovery must be conducted in the specific sequence that the documentation prescribes, because the sequence reflects the Mechanicus's accumulated knowledge of how Dark Age technology was organized and how disturbing it in the wrong order damages the information content that the organization contains. The return to the Forge world with a significant discovery is the highest moment in an Explorator Magos's career. The moment when the accumulated effort of the expedition is delivered to the institution that sent it in the form that the institution's mission holds as its highest aspiration. The fabricator locum receives the recovered materials personally in the significant cases, the formal ceremony of reception reflecting the theological weight that the Mechanicus places on the recovery of the Omnissiah's knowledge. The Magi who subsequently analyze the recovered materials, determining what they are and what they represent, and what new understanding of the Omnissiah's technical design they provide, are among the most senior and most capable members of the institution's relevant specializations, and their work of analysis and integration is in many respects more demanding than the expedition work that preceded it. A tech priest of very long service does not retire. The word retirement implies the existence of a stage after service in which the individual continues to exist, but is no longer required to perform their service function, and this stage is not one that the Mechanicus's institutional structure formally recognizes or supports. What exists instead is continuation at a level and in a form that the members' remaining capabilities permit, the gradual reduction of active service responsibilities as the components that enable active service become less reliable, and the eventual transition to the specific final status that each member's individual circumstances determine. The servitors occupy the far end of the spectrum from the full tech priest, the category of Mechanicus-affiliated individuals whose biological substrate has been reduced to the minimum necessary for the neurological function that serves the specific purpose to which they have been assigned. Their cognitive capacity reduced through the specific procedures of servitor creation to something that does not process the world the way a person processes the world, but that functions reliably and continuously in the specific task they have been configured for. A servitor is not a person in the functional sense anymore. This is acknowledged by the Mechanicus's theology through the specific distinction it maintains between the tech priest, who has undergone voluntary progressive modification toward the machine, and the servitor, who has undergone involuntary or semi-voluntary total reduction to function. The distinction is maintained with care because the Mechanicus's institutional integrity depends on it, because an institution that did not maintain this distinction would face the specific problem of its members being uncertain about what lies at the end of their service path in ways that would affect their willingness to commit to it. Most tech priests who have served for very long periods reach a state in which the accumulated augmentations they have acquired over decades of service constitute the majority of their functional existence, and the biological components that remain are maintained not because they are superior to the mechanical alternatives, but because the specific cognitive processes that full tech priesthood requires still depend on them. Because the Omnissiah's theology holds that the consciousness that practices the Mechanicus's tradition must retain enough of its original biological substrate to maintain the continuity of identity that the practice requires. The specific threshold of biological content below which the Mechanicus's theology holds that the practitioner can no longer claim the full status of tech priest has been the subject of theological argument within the Mechanicus for 10,000 years and has not been resolved. the argument being one that the institution's senior members are personally invested in ways that complicate the objectivity of their theological assessments. The dreadnought equivalent that the Mechanicus maintains for its own most valued senior members is the Iron Strider, or the Castellan robot chassis adapted for this specific purpose, a mechanical body into which the consciousness of a dying but not yet incapacitated senior magos can be transferred in a way that preserves their operational capability beyond the point where their augmented biological components would otherwise cease to sustain them. This is not the same as servitorization. The consciousness transferred into such a chassis retains its full cognitive capability and its theological standing and its institutional rank, continuing to serve the Mechanicus in the specific capacity that decades of service have made them most valuable for. It is instead the logical endpoint of the progressive replacement that began with the first mechadendrites installed during the novitiate period, the complete transition to mechanical existence that the Mechanicus's theology holds as the closest approximation to the Omnissiah's nature available to any material being. Very few tech priests reach this point. Most are lost before it to the hazards of the Mechanicus's work and the hazards of the galaxy that the Mechanicus's work takes them into, to the specific risks of expedition service, and to the general entropy that the 41st millennium applies to everything within it. But the theoretical existence of this endpoint as a possibility within the institution's framework is significant for what it represents about the Mechanicus's vision of what a complete tech priest career looks like. The complete arc from biological novitiate to fully mechanical senior magos, from the first tentative recitation of the litany of beginning to the operation of a consciousness that has been progressively approximating the machine for centuries, through the final form in which the approximation is complete. The work continues. The machines are maintained. The litanies are recited. The Omnissiah's knowledge is sought in the uncharted regions and recovered in the ancient caches and preserved in the Mechanicus's archives against the entropy that the galaxy applies to everything it contains. The forge fires burn on the forge worlds. The Skitarii advance in their red and silver ranks. The Titans walk. The knights pilot their suits and carry the impressions of their ancestors into each engagement alongside their own living presence. The Explorator fleets chart courses into the dark. This is what happens when you join the Adeptus Mechanicus. Not a conclusion, a direction, a path that extends further than any individual member can see the end of, measured in decades and centuries of service and in the specific accumulation of technical knowledge and theological development and progressive modification that constitutes a life lived in the specific way that the Mechanicus holds to be the highest aspiration available to any being that began biological and has been moving since the day of joining towards something more. The machine endures. The flesh serves its purpose and is replaced when something more reliable is available. The Omnissiah's knowledge waits in the dark between the stars for the hands that will recover it. The work is never finished. The work is the point. The Adeptus Mechanicus's relationship with the Imperium of Man is the most consequential institutional relationship in imperial politics, and it is the most complicated one, and the two facts are related. The Mechanicus is indispensable to the Imperium in a way that no other institution is indispensable to it, because no other institution controls what the Mechanicus controls, which is the knowledge and the practice of maintaining the technology that the Imperium depends on for its military function, its economic function, its administrative function, and its basic continued existence as a civilization capable of sustaining itself across 1,000,000 worlds. Without the Mechanicus, the Imperium's weapons cannot be repaired when they break, and its vehicles cannot be maintained when their systems fail, and its starships cannot cross the void when their drives require the specific technical attention that only Mechanicus training produces practitioners capable of providing. The Mechanicus knows this. The fabricator generals who have occupied the supreme position in the institution's hierarchy for 10,000 years have known it, and they have used it with the specific institutional wisdom of an organization that understands its leverage and that applies that leverage precisely rather than crudely, extracting from the relationship with the Imperium the specific concessions that maintain the Mechanicus's autonomy and advance its institutional interests without pushing the Imperium to the point of seeking alternatives that would threaten the monopoly that the leverage depends on. The specific institutional interests that the Mechanicus advances through the relationship are the continuation of its technological monopoly, which the Treaty of Mars established and which the Mechanicus maintains through the specific management of technical knowledge distribution, ensuring that the knowledge required to maintain imperial technology flows outward from the Mechanicus's trained practitioners rather than being disseminated in forms that would allow non-Mechanicus entities to develop independent maintenance capability, the continuation of its theological autonomy, which allows the Mechanicus to maintain the Omnissiah worship and the associated technological philosophy that define its institutional culture without the ecclesiarchy's oversight or the Inquisition's intervention, and the continuation of the expedition rights that allow the Mechanicus to send its Explorator fleets to the galaxy's uncharted regions without requiring specific imperial military escort or political approval for each expedition. The tensions in the relationship express themselves in specific and recurring forms. The Inquisition's general authority over all imperial institutions runs into the Mechanicus's specific treaty-based autonomy in ways that individual inquisitors and individual magi manage through the specific negotiations of their respective institutional positions, sometimes smoothly and sometimes not, the outcome depending on the relative seniority and institutional backing of the parties involved and on the specific nature of the issue that has brought them into contact. An Ordo Hereticus Inquisitor investigating suspected heresy on a Forge world is technically within their authority to do so, and is practically engaging with an institution that has its own definition of heresy that does not always match the Inquisition's and that has its own internal mechanisms for addressing what it identifies as heretical behavior that it prefers to activate before external intervention is necessary. The Astra Militarum's relationship with the Mechanicus is the most practically significant of the day-to-day relationships because the Astra Militarum depends on the Mechanicus's tech priests to maintain the vehicles and weapons that its regiments use in the field, and the tech priests attached to guard regiments occupy a specific position within those regiment structures that is simultaneously inside the military unit and outside its normal command hierarchy. A tech priest accompanying an Astra Militarum regiment answers to the regiment's commander for operational matters and to the Mechanicus's hierarchy for technical and theological matters, and the specific cases where operational and theological requirements conflict are resolved through the specific personal judgment of the tech priest and the specific institutional authority of the regiment's commander, a resolution that works adequately in most cases and produces friction in the cases where it does not. The Space Marine chapters have their own Tech Marines, Space Marines who have undertaken a portion of the Mechanicus's technical training without leaving the chapter's service, and who serve as the primary technical practitioners for the chapter's equipment maintenance. The Tech Marines training is conducted on Mars and involves years of service within the Mechanicus's institutional structure before the Tech Marine returns to their chapter. And during those years, the Tech Marine experiences the Mechanicus's theological and technical culture in a way that leaves marks that the chapter's own culture must subsequently accommodate. A Tech Marine who has spent years on Mars returns to their chapter as someone who has been partially shaped by the Mechanicus, whose relationship with machines and with the Omnissiah's theology is not quite the same as the relationship their chapter's own culture would have produced, and whose institutional loyalty consequently has a specific complexity that the chapter's chaplains and chapter master understand and manage as a standing feature of the Tech Marine's position rather than as a problem requiring resolution. The Mechanicus's political position on the High Lords of Terror is represented by the Fabricator General, who sits among the 12 High Lords and participates in the governance of the Imperium at the highest institutional level. The Fabricator General's specific political priorities in the Senatorum Imperialis reflect the Mechanicus's institutional interests, and the Fabricator General exercises the Mechanicus's considerable institutional leverage in the specific political context of the High Lord's deliberations with the sophistication of an institution that has been participating in imperial politics for 10,000 years and that understands the specific dynamics of this governing body with the accumulated expertise of all the Fabricator Generals who preceded the current incumbent. The relationship between the Fabricator General and the Lord Commander of the Imperium in the current age, the Primarch Rabaut Guilliman, is the most politically significant bilateral relationship in the Senatorum Imperialis. Guilliman's return and his assessment of the Mechanicus's role in the Imperium's dysfunction have produced specific tensions that the current Fabricator General Belisarius Cawl has navigated with the specific skill of a Magos who has been in his current role for longer than most Fabricator Generals serve in theirs, and who consequently understands the political landscape of the High Lords with a depth of knowledge that most of his institutional counterparts cannot match. The specific nature of the relationship between Cawl and Guilliman, the Primarch who commissioned the Primaris Space Marine project that Cawl spent 10,000 years developing and who has now returned to see that project implemented, is the subject of ongoing institutional management that both parties approach with the specific caution of entities who share a significant common interest and a significant institutional tension. The Forge Worlds are not simply manufacturing planets. The description is accurate in the most basic sense, but it fails to capture the specific character of these worlds, which is the character of planets that have been entirely dedicated to a single purpose for so long that the purpose has become the planet, that there is no meaningful distinction between what the Forge World is and what it does, because the two have been identical for so long that the distinction does not survive examination. Mars is the oldest and the most important, but Mars is not alone. There are approximately 1,000 formally recognized Forge Worlds distributed across the Imperium's territory, each one a center of the Mechanicus's technical and theological activity, each one producing the weapons and vehicles and equipment that the Imperium's military machine requires in the quantities that continuous warfare demands. The distribution of Forge Worlds across the Imperium is not even. The Segmentum Solar and the Segmentum Tempestus have the highest concentrations, the oldest and most established Forge Worlds located in the regions closest to Terra, where the Mechanicus's institutional history runs deepest. The outer segmentums have fewer, the distances involved making both the supply chain and the institutional oversight more challenging. Risa is the most productive of the Forge Worlds after Mars itself. Its primary manufacturing output, the plasma weapons that the Imperium's military forces use across every combat category, and that Risa's specific technical heritage in plasma technology allows it to produce at a quality and a volume that other Forge Worlds cannot match. The Ryzen tech priests have developed over centuries the specific expertise in plasma containment and plasma weapon maintenance that makes their work in this area the reference standard for the wider Mechanicus, and the Ryzen expedition fleets that have searched for STC knowledge in this specialization have found more relevant material than any other Forge Worlds expeditions in the same domain. Risa has also been attacked more frequently than almost any other Forge World, its strategic value making it a target for the Orc Wars that have swept through its region, and for the specific Chaos forces that recognize the value of eliminating or capturing a Forge World of this production significance. Styges 8 is one of the most controversial of the Forge Worlds in the Mechanicus's internal politics. Its specific theological tradition having developed in directions that the orthodox Mars-centered theology finds less than fully comfortable. The Stygian tech priests have been more willing than most Forge Worlds to engage with Xenos technology in their study of mechanism, applying the Omnissiah's frameworks of understanding to alien devices in ways that the orthodox tradition holds should be reserved for human-made technology. The argument that machine spirits exist in alien machines as surely as in human ones, and that the Omnissiah's knowledge encompasses the mechanisms of all species rather than only humanity's, is a Stygian position that Mars has never formally accepted and has never formally condemned. The political relationship between the two Forge worlds, occupying the specific space of a dispute that neither party has found it beneficial to force to a formal resolution. Lucius is the Forge world that the Mechanicus has dedicated most completely to the production of its primary military hardware, the Titan legions and the night suits and the heaviest war machines that the institution maintains and deploys. The scale of the manufacturing facilities on Lucius is staggering even by the standards of Forge worlds. The Titan production capability that the world's facilities represent being among the most significant strategic assets in the Imperium's manufacturing base. The Titan legions, whose machines are produced and maintained on Lucius, carry in their institutional heritage the specific relationship with the world that produced them, and the Magi who oversee Lucius's production are consequently among the most politically significant members of the Mechanicus's hierarchy. The oversight of the Imperium's Titan production capacity, making them powerful in the most direct sense of controlling the means of producing the most powerful ground weapons available to the Imperium's military forces. Graia is a Forge world that has experienced one of the most dramatic events in the recent history of any Mechanicus world, the Orc invasion of the world during the period of the Third War for Armageddon, and the subsequent Space Marine response that prevented the complete Orc conquest of the world's manufacturing facilities. The battle for Graia involved Space Marine forces fighting through the Forge world's industrial districts alongside the Mechanicus's own Skitarii and their Titans in the specific combined arms engagement that major Orc invasions of Forge worlds produce when the Forge world has sufficient military resources to contest the invasion rather than simply being overrun. The Mechanicus's institutional record of the Graia defense is comprehensive and is studied by the Magi responsible for Forge world defense planning as one of the most recent major examples of the specific challenges and the specific resources required for this category of engagement. The economic relationship between the Forge worlds and the rest of the Imperium is mediated through the Mechanicus's institutional framework rather than through the Administratum's normal trade and taxation systems, the Treaty of Mars having established the Mechanicus's independence from the Administratum's oversight in the management of its internal economy. The Forge worlds produce for the Imperium and receive from the Imperium the raw materials that they cannot produce themselves, and the food that a world whose surface has been converted to industrial use cannot grow for itself, and the specific terms of these exchanges are managed through the bilateral agreements between the Mechanicus and the various imperial institutions that consume its output rather than through the Administratum's comprehensive trade regulation framework that governs most of the Imperium's internal economic activity. The human populations that inhabit the Forge worlds occupy a specific social position that is unlike the social position of human populations on other world types, their entire existence embedded within the Mechanicus's institutional structure in a way that leaves no meaningful outside. A mid-hive worker on a hive world exists within the hive's social structure, but outside the governance of the Adeptus Ministorum and the Administratum and the other imperial institutions in the specific sense that those institutions operate around them, rather than constituting the totality of the institutional context they inhabit. A worker on a Forge world exists within the Mechanicus, and nothing else. The Mechanicus being both their employer and their government and their church, and the provider of their healthcare and the overseer of their children's assessment and routing into the institution's various service tracks. The Mechanicus is the world for Forge world populations in a way that no other single institution is the world for any other population in the Imperium. The standard template constructs contain knowledge. This is obvious from their description as repositories of pre-heresy technology and is not the element of them that requires the most careful explanation. What requires careful explanation is the specific nature of the knowledge they contain and the way they contain it. because the STCs are not databases in the sense of organized information stores that are user queries for specific content. They are more complex and in some respects more interesting than that, and the Mechanicus's 10,000-year effort to recover them reflects both the extraordinary value of what they contain and the extraordinary complexity of what accessing that content actually involves. The standard template constructs were developed during the Dark Age of technology as a specific response to the problem of maintaining technological civilization across interstellar distances, the problem of ensuring that human colonies established on new worlds had access to the technical knowledge required to build and maintain the technology that civilization required without depending on a continuous supply chain from established worlds that might not always be available. An STC was a complete repository of the technical knowledge required to build everything that a human civilization needed, from basic tools, through shelter construction, through agriculture, through medicine, through manufacturing, through space travel, organized in a form that allowed a colony with an STC to become technologically self-sufficient without requiring external input of anything except raw materials and the human labor to execute the STC's designs. The STCs that the Mechanicus has recovered are incomplete. This is the central frustration of the Mechanicus's STC recovery program. The fact that the vast majority of what has been recovered is fragmentary, portions of complete STCs rather than the complete documents themselves. A fragment of an STC that describes a specific vehicle design or a specific manufacturing process is extraordinarily valuable to the Mechanicus because it represents knowledge that the Mechanicus does not currently possess in documented form and that it may not have been able to reconstruct from existing knowledge alone. But a fragment is not a complete STC, and the complete STC's value is qualitatively different from the value of any fragment because a complete STC is a comprehensive and organized knowledge base in a way that a collection of fragments, even a very extensive collection, is not. The Mechanicus's knowledge base, as it currently exists, is largely reconstructed from fragments and from the specific pieces of pre-heresy knowledge that survived the Age of Strife, intact enough to be preserved in the institutional memory of the Forge worlds that maintained continuity through that period. The reconstruction is comprehensive enough to maintain the Imperium's technology at a functional level and to produce the weapons and vehicles and equipment that the military requires. It is not comprehensive enough to return the Imperium to the technological level of the Dark Age of technology, a level whose specific achievements the Mechanicus knows about in outline and cannot replicate in practice, because the specific technical knowledge that would allow replication is in the complete STCs that have not been recovered. The machine spirits of the older and more complex machines know things that the Mechanicus's practitioners do not know how to ask. This is a fact that the more philosophically inclined members of the Mechanicus have noted in the accumulated records of their practice. The observation that working with very old and very complex machines through the neural interface of direct machine-spirit communion produces occasionally the impression of a depth of knowledge in the machine that exceeds what the Mechanicus's records describe as the machine's operational parameters. A Titan of great age, whose Throne Mechanicum has accumulated the impressions of centuries of Princeps may, in specific moments of deep communion, convey to its current Princeps technical information that the Princeps cannot subsequently verify through the Mechanicus's formal knowledge base, information that performs correctly when applied, but that has no identified source in any documented STC fragment or formal knowledge transfer. Whether this represents actual knowledge preserved in the machine spirit from the Dark Age of technology, the specific moment of original manufacture when the complete STC knowledge base was accessible to the craftsman who built the Titan, or whether it represents something else, something that the Mechanicus's theology has a specific framework for, and that the more mechanistic members of the institution have a different and less comfortable framework for, is one of those questions that the Mechanicus does not publicly pursue to a definitive answer. The answer matters. If the machine spirits of ancient machines genuinely preserve knowledge from the Dark Age of technology, then the Mechanicus's STC recovery program has a complementary approach available to it that it has not been systematically pursuing: the approach of deep communion with the oldest machines as a recovery methodology rather than purely as a maintenance and operational practice. The institutional resistance to pursuing this approach systematically comes from the specific sensitivity of the question of what machine spirits actually are, because pursuing this approach systematically requires taking a specific position on that question, and taking a specific position on that question has institutional implications that the Mechanicus's political management of its internal theological disputes has found it preferable not to force. The machines know things. The machines that the Mechanicus maintains, and the machines that the Mechanicus's Explorator fleets find in the ancient ruins of the dark age of technology's civilization, and the machines that walk and fight and manufacture and navigate throughout the Imperium, all contain within their machine spirits whatever it is that machine spirits actually contain. The Mechanicus practices daily reverence toward these spirits without fully resolving what it is that the reverence is directed toward. This is not hypocrisy, it is the specific epistemic situation of an institution that has built its entire existence around a theological framework that contains genuine uncertainty at its foundation, and that has concluded reasonably that the uncertainty does not diminish the value of the practice, because the practice produces outcomes that justify it, regardless of the philosophical argument about its ultimate basis. The Omnissiah endures. The work continues. The machines are maintained. This is the Adeptus Mechanicus. This is what you joined. The Mechanicus's taxonomy of specializations is more elaborate than any other institution in the Imperium maintains for its practitioners, a reflection of the institution's specific culture of precise categorization and the genuine breadth of technical knowledge that full Mechanicus service encompasses. Each Magos who achieves the senior grade carries a specialization designation that names the primary domain of their mastery, and the specialization shapes every aspect of their subsequent career, the work they are assigned and the expeditions they are invited to join, and the specific institutional relationships they develop with the Forge World facilities and the fleet assets that their expertise is relevant to. The Magos Technicus is the generalist designation applied to Magi whose primary expertise is in the maintenance and operation of the broad category of mechanical and electronic systems that constitute the majority of the Mechanicus's daily work. A Magos Technicus is the most common senior grade in the Mechanicus's civilian hierarchy, the individuals responsible for the specific ongoing work of Forge World maintenance and the management of the technical teams that perform it. The specific skill that the Magos Technicus develops that distinguishes them from the adepts below them is not simply more knowledge of the same domains, but the specific ability to diagnose problems in systems whose complexity makes the cause of malfunction non-obvious, to read the diagnostic data from a large and complex system and identify the specific component or subsystem whose failure is producing the symptoms being observed. This diagnostic capability is the practical expression of the deep technical understanding that years of maintenance work and theological study combined produce in the Mechanicus's practitioners, and it is the capability that makes the Magos Technicus valuable in ways that the accumulated technical information in a data slate alone could not replace. The Magos Errant is the specialization of the expedition practitioner, the Magi whose primary technical expertise is oriented toward the specific challenges of working in uncharted and hostile environments rather than the maintained infrastructure of an established Forge world. A Magos Errant is trained in the emergency repair and improvised maintenance techniques that expedition service requires, capable of solving technical problems in the field without the support of the Forge world's full resource base, and is additionally trained in the specific security assessment and first contact protocols that expedition service involves. The Magos Errant's technical knowledge is necessarily broader and less deep than the Magos Technicus's in any specific domain. The demands of expedition work requiring breadth of knowledge over depth in ways that the Forge world's more specialized work does not. This breadth makes the Magos Errant valuable in contexts where the specific problem cannot be predicted in advance, and it makes them occasionally frustrating to work with for senior Magi whose own specialization has produced a depth of knowledge in a specific domain that the Magos Errant's breadth approach can feel like it undervalues. The Magos Militant is the Mechanicus's designation for practitioners whose primary expertise is in the military application of the Mechanicus's technologies, specifically the oversight and operational management of Skitarii forces and the integration of Mechanicus military assets with the broader imperial military effort. A Magos Militant works alongside the Skitarii as their operational command, translating the tactical requirements of the Forge World's security or the Expedition Fleet's protection into the specific deployments and assignments that the Skitarii execute. The Magos Militant is trained in both the technical maintenance of the Skitarii's augmented bodies and weapons and the tactical application of their specific capabilities, combining the engineering knowledge of the Mechanicus with a military competence that most other Magi do not develop. The Magos Genitor is the biological specialization, the practitioners whose domain is the study and modification of organic systems through the Mechanicus's theological framework of biological mechanism. The Genitor performs the augmentation procedures that the Mechanicus applies to its own members and manages the more complex biological modifications that the Skitarii and the Servitor programs require, and their research into organic systems is conducted under the framework of recovering the Omnissiah's knowledge of biological mechanism that the theological prohibition on original research permits. The most senior Genitors are among the most knowledgeable biological scientists in the galaxy, their combination of the Mechanicus's archived knowledge and their own decades of practice producing an understanding of organic systems that the Imperium's more conventional medical practitioners cannot match, though the specific applications that the Genitors make of this understanding are not always ones that the Imperium's conventional medical ethics would endorse. The Magos Explorator is the expedition's specialization, the senior practitioners whose careers have been defined by the search for standard template constructs and who have developed the specific combination of technical assessment capability and expedition leadership experience that this work requires. An Explorator. Magos typically commands their own expedition fleet by the time they achieve the senior grade, the institutional confidence in their capabilities having been demonstrated through the successful management of progressively more significant expeditions over the decades that precede their achievement of the full Explorator designation. The Explorator Magi are among the most widely traveled individuals in the Imperium, their careers having taken them to regions of the galaxy that most citizens of the Imperium do not know exist, and the specific knowledge they carry of what exists in those regions is one of the Mechanicus's most closely held institutional assets. The Magos Dominus, who oversees the Great Forge complexes, has been described in an earlier part of this account, but warrants additional detail about the specific skills that the role requires. Overseeing a forge complex of any significant scale involves managing a workforce that is itself stratified in the Mechanicus's specific way, from the menials who perform the physical labor through the adepts who maintain the complex's systems, through the senior Magi who manage specific technical departments within the complex. The Magos Dominus, who manages this entire structure, requires not only the deep technical knowledge that their own primary specialization represents, but the specific institutional management capability that overseeing a diverse and hierarchically complex workforce demands. The political dimensions of managing the relationships between departments whose technical domains overlap and whose resource requirements sometimes conflict is a component of the Dominus role that the formal technical training does not directly address, and that the practitioners who are successful in this role have developed through the specific experience of managing it. The Archmagos Veneratus is the title applied to the most senior members of the Mechanicus hierarchy below the Fabricator General, the designation that indicates a practitioner who has reached the final stage of the formal hierarchy that most tech priests can aspire to within a single lifetime of service, however extended that lifetime may be through the Mechanicus's augmentation. An Archmagos Veneratus has typically been in service for centuries, their accumulated knowledge and institutional experience making them one of the most significant technical resources the Mechanicus possesses, and their role within the institution is correspondingly advisory in the broader sense of an institution drawing on the specific wisdom that exceptional depth of experience produces. The Archmagos Veneratus advises the Fabricator General and the senior Forge World administrators on the specific technical and theological questions that the Mechanicus faces, not because their advice is formally required for decisions to be made, but because the quality of the decisions made with access to this level of accumulated expertise is substantially better than the quality of decisions made without it. Belisarius Cawl, the Archmagos Dominus and Fabricator General of the 41st Millennium's current period, represents the most extraordinary individual case study in what the Mechanicus's trajectory can produce in a member of sufficient capability and longevity. Cawl has been in service for over 10,000 years, having been present during the Horus Heresy and having survived the subsequent 10,000 years through the specific combination of augmentation and cunning and the specific institutional protection that being extremely useful to the people with the power to destroy you provides. His augmentation level is beyond what most Mechanicus practitioners achieve even at the end of careers measured in centuries, his biological substrate reduced to a fraction of his total functioning mass, and his cognitive processing distributed across multiple storage and processing systems that together constitute something that the Mechanicus's formal taxonomy of consciousness does not have an entirely adequate category for. He was given a secret project by the Primarch Robuta Guilliman before the Horus Heresy's conclusion, the development of the Primaris space marine technology that would eventually be deployed in the 41st millennium, and he has spent 10,000 years completing that project alongside whatever else his extraordinary career has required of him. Cawl is what the Mechanicus produces in its most extreme expression, a being who began as a biological human with a specific cognitive profile that the Mechanicus identified as worth developing, and who has been developing that profile for 10 millennia in the specific direction that the Mechanicus's theology and the specific demands of his extraordinary career have jointly determined. He is not the same being who began the process. Whatever that being was, the 10,000 years of progressive modification and accumulated experience, and the specific traumas and achievements of a career that has encompassed more than any standard life could contain, have produced something from it that shares the continuity of a single long life without necessarily sharing the essential character of the being who began it. This is a question that Cawl has thought about, given the millennia he has had to think about it, and that the records of his thinking on it suggest he has arrived at positions that are more complex and more personal than the Mechanicus's formal theology provides frameworks for. This is the Adeptus Mechanicus in its full range, from the novitiate's first litany to the Archmagus's 10,000-year project, from the first mechadendrite installation to the consciousness distributed across multiple storage systems, from the maintenance routine of a mid-level Forge World facility to the expedition fleet's discovery of an STC fragment in a system that has not been visited by any human ship since the Age of Strife. It is an institution of extraordinary capability and extraordinary strangeness, one of the most significant forces shaping the galaxy of the 41st millennium, and one of the least understood by those who depend on what it provides. The machines are maintained, the Omnissiah is acknowledged, the knowledge is sought, the work continues. This is what you joined.